Business is easy. Family business is hard, says Charlie Bitzer, Chair and CEO of ABARTA. The relationships and dynamics within family-owned companies present distinct challenges for their boards. Welcome to BoardVision, the official podcast of the NACD, the National Association of Corporate Directors. We share perspectives from leading corporate directors and explore what makes boards effective, including how they can help companies prepare for the future. In this episode, Bitzer talks with NACD Senior Member Engagement Advisor Kait Armstrong about the governance of family-owned businesses. They discuss the difficulties of generational transitions, the importance of aligning culture between the board and the family, and how independent directors can engage family leaders in tough conversations. Have you heard about the benefits of NACD's certification program? Today's boards operate in a dynamic and rapidly evolving world. The National Association of Corporate Directors provides directorship certification that sets the standard for high-impact board directors. It's more than certification. This is the premier program, preparing directors to successfully navigate an increasingly complex business and governance landscape. NACD's directorship certification will enable you to demonstrate commitment, deliver confidently, and create real value for your organization. Learn more and apply today at nacdonline.org. And now, your host.
Hi, Charlie. Thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
Yes, we're excited to talk about family directors and family boards today. And I think we should start at the beginning. You're the CEO of ABARTA. Tell us about your family business board experience and the different roles that you fill.
Thank you, Kait. It's an honor for me to be here and share what I've learned. We are a third and fourth generation family business. We were founded in 1935, and we started in newspapers, and then we got in the Coca-Cola business. During Gen 3, we had an opportunity to grow in the Coca-Cola business and get very large. And in 2017, we acquired a lot of Coca-Cola territory and tripled our size. So we really transformed the company. First generation didn't have a board with a founder. We started out with a board of advisors, and in the second generation, from the second generation to the third, we went to a fiduciary board, and we've had a fiduciary board since 1996 and continue that model today where we have a majority of independent directors. So during that evolution, as a business unit manager, probably once a year I would come in and present to the board. And then when I became division head, relocated to Pittsburgh, I went to every quarterly board meeting. I was not a board member, but I went to every board meeting. I was held accountable for my business responsibilities, but I was also treated like a director, but just not, I didn't have a vote. And then in, 2016, I became a full director. Because we have to have a majority of independents, there's a limited number of slots available for the family. But I always, even though I wasn't a voting director until 2016, the 15 years prior to that, I felt like a director. They treated me like a director. So today I'm a full director. So that's kind of the evolution that I went through personally as it relates to boards.
I think a lot of people, they think of family businesses as being small or local, but about 35% of Fortune 500 are family-controlled companies. So I guess, again, fundamentals here, what makes a family business a family business?
That's a great question. And the best way to describe it is whenever we would hire somebody from a public company, after about 6 months or a year, I would ask them, what's the difference between working for ABARTA and working for the public company they came from? And surprisingly, I got very consistent answers. One is that family business has a soul. We have values, we have culture, we care about our associates. That's number one. Number two is we have a long-term perspective. Public companies think quarterly, they make short-term decisions to make a number that might hurt them long-term, where family enterprises tend to think multiple years. We think about generations now and, how are we going to set this up for G5? that's exciting. And the last one was we make decisions very quickly. I think family businesses tend to do that. There's not a lot of bureaucracy. And they say that's exciting because they get answers much more quickly than they do in a public company. But it's also scary because there's nowhere to hide if the decision doesn't work out.
That really resonates. I think you alluded to it earlier, but because you are thinking generationally, right? When do you find the family business start to feel those growing pains, as it were, that require board attention? And what sorts of growing pains are they concerned with? Do you have any anecdotes you want to share about some of the pains you've experienced along the way?
Yeah, I think one of the growing pains is going from a board of advisors to a fiduciary board. And I really have to give my father a lot of credit for that because he was still CEO when we did that. And even watching him transition from having sort of a friendly shareholder advisor board to an independent fiduciary board with directors that have no connection, successful in their career, but no connection to the company at all. He was kind of a bear before a couple of weeks before the every board meeting, and he would lose sleep, and he'd over prepare, and he was very, very uncomfortable. So I think that was one of the growing pains. And then as we transitioned from second to third, our generation, we were in our late 30s, maybe early 40s when we did that. Our fiduciary board was still fairly new, and some of the directors we brought on didn't work out. I think there's a few reasons for that. One, we didn't really know what we were looking for. I think number two, we underappreciated continuity of the values between the directors and our company and our family. But I will say, after a lot of missteps in the beginning, I think we've got much, much better at it, particularly the alignment of the values. We hired directors who wanted to impose their vision on the company as opposed to trying to understand our vision and then help us achieve that vision. And I think in the fourth generation, as we look at it now, in our third generation, we had 3 actives, we had 2 inactives, so we only had 5 people. So all the major stakeholders were in the same room at the same time. And what we're learning with G4 is that that's not going to be the case. We're going to have some shareholders that are in governance, some shareholders that are in management, and then there's going to be a shareholder group. And today we're trying to figure out, okay, how do we rewire all of that so that the communication is as good as if we only had 5 people?
Absolutely.
Yeah. And the G4 is really taking ownership of it, and it's really fun to watch. The generational transitions are critical vulnerability points, I think, or pain points, because what worked for one generation is not going to work for another. And the question is, how do you rewire yourself to keep that cohesion and engagement from one generation to the next?
Yeah. What do you think are the signs that a family business has reached that inflection point, right? And that leadership or strategy or governance needs to change?
I think you can see the symptoms before you see the problem. And, the symptoms are, more conflict, more disagreement. For example, I think we went through a time where all of the owners didn't have the same vision of the future. And I think a board can see that. And actually, I've been on boards where I've seen that, where different family leaders have different visions for the company. And that has to get reconciled. It's very hard to move forward. On a broad basis, you think about what served the first generation may not serve the second, and what served the second may not serve the third. And I can tell you in our company, being diversified in newspaper publishing, energy, and the beverage business, we really looked at that and said, we need to make a choice. We need to either get big or get out. And we looked at the newspaper business, again, from a strategy standpoint, and said, it'd be tough with 1 or 2 papers to get big, and there's not a lot of appetite for that. So we chose to exit. And exiting the legacy business is very hard. There's an emotional component to that. And again, I think that's where independent board members can provide some counsel. I will tell you, they recommended that to us for several years before we actually did it, So I think being an independent director, having patience with the family as they grapple with those types of issues. And then in the beverage business, we had an opportunity to get scale, and we jumped all over it. And we really transformed our company. And I think that's where an independent board can, take a look at the future, take a look at where the business is, take a look at what the future opportunities are, and really counsel on strategy that will allow them to grow long term. We always talked about, we didn't want to be the last buggy whip company after the automobile came into existence. From a governance standpoint, I think it's driven by generation. I think first generation, if you can get a board of advisors, that would be great. Founder doesn't have to do that. I think the good ones do that just to get an outside voice. Second generation, the same. You can either go with broader board of advisors of people that aren't necessarily the lawyers or the accountants, but independent CEOs or people that have run companies or run divisions within a company to get that perspective. From 3 to 4, it's really about how you rewire. For us, it's about how do we rewire where all the principals aren't in the room anymore. And that it's going to be as much of a challenge, probably more of a challenge for G4 to figure that out because that's their future. And I counsel them that, as they figure out how to rewire all these roles and responsibilities with different people in the room is they should think about how they rewire might serve G5 or think about it in a way that'll scale. Because we had 5 in our generation. We have 18 in the next generation. We already have 23 in G5. Most of them are under the age of 10. And so even in the company, we're doing that in terms of shareholder meetings and shareholder communication. We're devising ways to communicate with shareholders in a way that'll scale over time. So trying to think forward.
Yeah, I think that forward thinking is essential. I mean, that is the role of the board. I'm curious how those independent directors, when they were counseling you through that, how did they broach the conversation with the family? Because like you said, there's some emotion involved.
Yeah, it's you get all kinds. I think the most effective directors that we've had, one were either ran a business unit or ran their own company or family CEO of a family enterprise, or run a business unit, or have a specialized knowledge of an industry. It depends on the topic. The best directors spend a lot of time in the beginning listening, understanding the history, understanding the culture, asking lots of questions. And then it's really coaching or advising the leadership to what they see. If they stay on the same path, is that going to lead to the outcomes that the family wants? For the most part, I don't think you have to worry about commitment or energy. That's one thing the family leadership brings is this innate alignment of incentives and desires and goals. Everybody wants it to be successful. And really what the discussion is around is what's the best way to make that happen? And I think that's where we are as a board today, is we all want the same thing. And that is we want a growing, prosperous, healthy enterprise. And, at the end of the day, it's leadership that has to make that decision. We can debate it, but once the decision is made, we all got to rally around that. And if it fails, it's not a browbeat. It's like, okay, that didn't work. What are we going to do next?
Yeah, absolutely. So I guess that kind of leads to the next question perfectly, which is what is the family's role in overseeing that kind of change management? Are there any special considerations for these family companies?
Yeah, I think again, I think it depends on which generation you are. We talk about this as we get more shareholders who are not in the room or in each conversation. It becomes important to rewire. And I'll give you an example. So in our generation, we could be owners, managers, and directors all at the same time. And so we've recognized in the next generation that isn't going to happen. So we have formed a family ownership group that is going to be the voice or have certain responsibilities from the family shareholder standpoint. And we've developed a board committee called the Shareholders Relations and Engagement Committee, and that's going to become the key connection between the shareholder group and the governance process. Recognizing that what worked before may not work now, and I can guarantee you it won't work in the future. So, and one thing, just last year, my cousin retired and I became chair and CEO. And what I've told the family and I've told the board is that the speed of business is a lot faster than the speed of governance. And as the business thinks 3 to 5 years out, governance needs to think 5 to 10, maybe 15. Businesses can move very fast, very agile, very quickly. Governance is a much longer process. So,
yeah, and it is practice. I think my favorite part of working with private companies is that they do have these unique compositions. They create committees just for their needs, and they have a little bit more freedom and flexibility. How do boards and family boards specifically, how does the culture factor into all of this, right? How do you balance the continuity of culture you mentioned at the beginning with that need for evolution?
Yeah, great questions, Kate. Really fun because we've talked about this and had this debate. Does the culture of the board reflect the culture of the business? Or does the culture of the business reflect the culture of the board? Because there have been times where we had that clash. And different families can answer that question differently. But what I can tell you from my experience is that the culture of the enterprise should represent the values of the family. Those values, the more better articulated and codified they are and communicated to governance and through governance to the organization, the better. The culture follows the values of the family. And I will tell you, having a family CEO is easier than having a non-family CEO because you represent that every day. But we're working on that in anticipation of a transition to a non-family CEO. And we don't want to lose those values.
Yeah, it's a great challenge, but it's really important work. And I'm wondering how independent directors play into all of this. How do they support this continuity culture and the family's legacy amid all of this change? Because some of them have been with you a little bit longer.
Yeah, it's a challenge, I would say, for directors, independent directors. But I think the more interaction they can have with, I would say, engaged leaders within the shareholder group, the more they can understand the history of the enterprise. Because I can tell you we have values in our company today that my grandfather started. And I can tell you one of them that makes our CFO and our auditors choke every time I talk about it. But we believe in closing our books very quickly. My grandfather manually used to close the books monthly in 3 days. And his idea was that's history, get them closed, learn from it, and move on. And we've had companies where it was 3-month lag in their monthly closes, and that didn't fit our culture, company we acquired. And I can tell you today, I am pressing that because I believe in it. Just stuff like that. We have a value of hard head, soft heart. Hard head is you make the tough-minded business decisions. Soft heart is, with great sensitivity to how those decisions affect people. And that came from my father. And, if you don't make the tough-minded business decisions, you might not be here because you're not competitive. But you also want to be very sympathetic or empathetic to how people who are affected by those decisions, particularly negatively, and how can we cushion that kind of inevitable event. So I think the more they can understand that, it'll give them better perspective on where the company is today. And then when they have that basis, that foundation, then they can look forward and say, okay, given this history, what is the logical or what is the best direction or counsel that I can give this enterprise in terms of the future? But if you don't understand the history, it's going to be probably more friction than necessary. That would be my counsel.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Charlie. It has been such a pleasure to hear from you. I love hearing from family business boards. We really appreciate your time.
Well, I appreciate being asked to be a part of this, and I can tell you, and I think I said this privately to you, business is easy, family business is hard, but that challenge is what can drive you to figure out what are the best ways to do it right for your own family. And if you accept that challenge, I will tell you the rewards are great. So thank you, Kate.
That concludes this episode of BoardVision. We hope you enjoyed listening. Please subscribe and join us next time. Until then, visit nacdonline.org to stay informed about the latest resources NACD has to offer, such as memberships, certification, national or chapter events, and our content, including reports, articles, and Directorship Magazine. That's nacdonline.org. Thank you for listening.